One moment of doubt turned into a lifetime of questions, and she's the only one who knows the truth. I remember precisely how the living room smelled the evening everything began to tilt. Old lemon cleaner and a faint trace of whatever tea she'd drunk that day. It was a smell I'd learned to associate with ordinary safety. The couch cushions gave under my weight in the exact way they always had. The TV was on, but quiet. Maya was at the table, hands wrapped around a mug, staring out the window. Her mouth was a small, tight line I'd seen before, when she worried about her mother, or when a production didn't come together the way she'd imagined. That night, it sat there like a question mark. My name is Evan. I was 38 when the foundation of my life, the life I'd constructed with her in small, careful increments, started to feel less like architecture and more like an illusion. We'd been together 12 years, married for 7. She taught creative writing and directed plays at the community college. I worked in IT project management, which means I live and die by deadlines and Gantt charts. On paper, we were compatible in the boring, practical ways. A mortgage, schedules that rarely synced but never collapsed. A rescue tabby named Rupert, who preferred me to her, which she insisted was unfair. People like to tell you their marriages in quick shorthand. We're good, they say. We have our rhythm. I used to say that too. Rhythm feels like an insurance policy. You trust it until the drum skips. The first hints were so small that I nearly mistook them for the weather. A text left on read. A canceled Saturday because of prep work. A lipstick smudge explained away as makeup from a rehearsal. She began bringing home more books than she could possibly read at once, always placing them in that pile on the coffee table that had until lately been an unspoken map of how we filled our nights. She started stretching the truth in a new, tiny way. Not the big, theatrical lies that tear families apart, but the kind that exist in punctuation. I'll be late became, I'll be later than I said, then I'm staying with a colleague, then nothing at all. You should know. I'm not an idiot. I notice things. I notice because my job trains me to notice. A missed commit, a late deliverable, they all have telltale traces. The human heart, it turns out, leaves traces too. A certain laugh, a phone held in the palm a little longer. The way someone brushes their hand through their hair and seems surprised when you see it. At first, I did what people do when they want to keep their lives tidy. I made coffee dates. I bought her flowers on Wednesdays, the stupid little half-dozen daisies she liked. I tried to be generous with my time. I told myself that love is a practice, and practices are built up slowly. But generosity is not an antidote to absence. It's a balm that soothes at the surface and doesn't touch the deeper wound. One night after a rehearsal she'd told me would end by 9, I waited up until midnight. I had no real reason to expect anything. She was rarely late without explanation, but something in me had turned porous. When she came in, cheeks flushed, smelling faintly of someone else's cologne, she slid into bed and asked me, softly, if I'd be okay in the morning because she had a meeting. I wanted to point to the shampoo and ask whose neck she'd been at, but I didn't. I didn't want to become the cruel, accusing man in a scene I hardly recognized. I told myself patience, trust, maturity, the litany that respectable men repeat to make themselves decent. The second night, I found a receipt in the washing machine. 2 coffees, a parking meter paid at 11:42 p.m., a small bar on the other side of town. It could have been an innocent mistake, a dropped note, a pocket with yesterday's takeaway. You learn to build stories in either direction depending on which emotion you feed. I fed fear. Fear makes you efficient. I cataloged things, dates, times, the rhythm of her absences. I made a list on my phone. It was an ugly little ledger. Jealousy starts quiet. It's an internal whisper at first, something you can try to ignore by doing the dishes and calling your mother. But whispering demands attention, and the mind has a terrible habit of giving it. I began to watch her in ways I had not known were possible. watching the way she smiled at her phone, half turned to hide the screen, timing how long she lingered by the sink after a call ended, casually checking her calendar when she left her laptop unlocked. None of it was noble. None of it felt justified by the truth of what I witnessed. It did not feel like love. It felt like a slow administration of suspicion. There was a man in the department everyone talked about, Daniel Hart. Visiting director, late 30s, a charm that felt easy and raw at the same time. Names are harmless until you notice the way they appear again and again. Daniel began to show up in pictures posted by students, in faculty thank yous, in casual tags. Great rehearsal with DH. I clicked through 100 tags out of a compulsion I could hardly explain. People's online lives are curated. I followed once. I parked 2 blocks away from the theater and watched through rain-dotted glass. She walked in under an umbrella like she owned the world, hair plastered to her temple, cheeks bright. He came out later than her. They walked side by side for a while, talking in that way colleagues speak when the content of their conversation is private because no one else understands the grammar. I felt my chest convulse. It was a small scene, no embrace, no overt flirtation. But she laughed in a way I had not heard in months, the kind of laugh that sounds like permission. I confronted her the next morning. "Who is Daniel?" I asked. It was a harmless question if you were a sitcom. It was everything if you were me. "Just someone from a festival," she said, killing the question with a casualness that was supposed to be balm. "He's only in town for a week." "Why are you laughing with him like that?" I asked. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely puzzled, and I realized she was practicing a new face, surprise edged with concern. "Evan, you're being paranoid. There's a particular cruelty to being told you're paranoid when the bees in your skull are real. It gaslights the evidence you carry. It makes you second-guess the things you've spent nights cataloging. Maybe you misread a smile. Maybe your brain is a conspiracy factory. Maybe you're projecting. These are reasonable things to consider. So you practice reason as ritual. Breathe, walk, drink water. This is what the therapist taught me when we finally went. We did go the therapist route because the world of suspicion felt like a public emergency to me. The counselor, a woman with a patient voice and a notebook, asked how long I'd felt like this, whether trust had broken slowly or in a particular event, what I wanted from the relationship. I wanted truth. I wanted honesty. I wanted to keep my dignity. She suggested boundary setting, jointly agreed times for updates, the kind of practical scaffolding that looks prosaic on paper but can be revolutionary if both parties engage earnestly. We tried. We did the sessions, the breathing, the asking and listening exercises. For a few weeks the world brightened. We cooked together, which had been a ritual we'd abandoned. She read me a piece of a new script she loved and we laughed in real time. It was a restoration of thrift store magic, small things making a reasonable impression. But the rupture had a memory of its own. The ledger in my phone hummed like a soft internal metronome, reminding me of the receipts, the nights, the laughter. It was then that things shifted in a way I couldn't predict. Not because she did something grand again, she didn't, but because she did something infinitely smaller and infinitely more intimate. She started telling me things that felt like tiny betrayals of our calendar. She'd say, in passing, "I met Daniel for coffee after rehearsal," and then, after a pause that was almost invisible, "He told me about his marriage falling apart when he was younger. He said he's different now. He listens in a way I didn't think was possible." The words I most feared were not the ones about a kiss or a touch. They were the ones about listening. Listening has the power to change a person. You can be faithful in body and betrayed in attention. I am aware as I write this how petty that sounds. There are armies of philosophers who will tell you love is more than attention. But when your life has been assembled out of small rituals and shared attention, someone else offering that particular kind of care can feel like theft. It's not always about the body. Sometimes it's about being witnessed. At some point, the question ceases to be whether she's cheating and becomes whether you can continue living with the question. The parishioner of doubt prays at different altars. For me, the decision changed the world into a set of calculations. Do I wait? Do I confront? Do I leave? The options are ugly because they each hurt. The night I thought I found proof, it was not cinematic. There was no bouquet of receipts, no incriminating video. There was a text left on her phone that I read because I'd discovered the careless habit of leaving it unlocked on the coffee table. It said, plain and small, "I can't stop thinking about last night." No signature, no salutation, no obvious sender. The message stinged like a bell. She was in the shower. I sat in the dimness and listened to the water run and felt, in those moments of domestic privacy, a kind of fissure open. When she came out, towel-wrapped and breathless, I asked, "Who's this from?" She blinked at me like I'd asked her the date of the week. "Oh, someone from the festival. A colleague." "A colleague?" "Yes." Her voice had that tone now. The practiced, almost forgiving tone of someone who understands the social script of infidelity and is trying to steer away from it without committing to anything. "He's going through a divorce. He needed someone to talk to." I wanted to give her the map, the spreadsheet, the receipts, and say, "See? It's not just this text." But the text is a shape that calls for interpretation. How many unread messages mean betrayal? How many late-night coffees? How many small, private phrases before a life alters? I had no algebra for heartbreak. That week, in a moment of sacrilegious curiosity, I created an account on a private email service and sent a message to a throwaway address I'd seen in a draft on her laptop once. It was childish and cowardly. I know that. The message was unsigned, blunt. "Are you seeing my wife?" The response came back the next day. "I don't think that's any of your business." It was a small rebuke, and it made me angrier in the precise place where humiliation sits. Confrontation came eventually, as confrontation tends to do, not in a dramatic scene, but in a private, exhausted 2 a.m. exchange, when we both were past the performative civility. "Do you want to be with me?" I asked. It was more of a reaching than a demand. She answered, and the answer was the kind of thing that could not be easily boxed. "I love you, Evan, but I am tired of feeling smaller in ways I can't explain. Sometimes the rehearsal room is where I feel like myself. It doesn't mean I want to be away from you. It means I want to be noticed as I am." Those words, "noticed as I am," are the hinge of many stories. If you are the kind of person who has ever felt invisible in a crowded room, you know the particular ache it invokes. To be seen is not merely to be watched. It is to be rendered as important, prioritized, held like a fragile thing. She was being honest, painfully so. She was also, in that moment, undoing everything we'd been rehearsing as a family. After that, the trajectory was not simple. We separated for a while, the kind of gentle separation where you split the laundry pile and decide who takes what plant. She took the side table we'd painted together, and I kept the armchair she preferred when she read. There was no fist on the table, no slammed door. It was civil and mortifying, and deeply sad. Yet what civility leaves in its wake is a more corrosive thing, the slow background of regret. Then, a month into the separation, something complicated happened. She called one evening and said softly, "There's something I need to tell you, and I was going to say it when we were sitting across from each other, but I suppose the phone will do." She didn't say the words right away. She let me sit with my own panic until I couldn't stand the silence. Finally, "I slept with him." Those words hit like a winter branch. The language was small, direct, almost clinical. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't explain. She said, "I'm sorry. It was a mistake. It meant something at the time, but now it means nothing except that I was trying to find myself. I asked the ridiculous questions you ask in horror at the betrayal." "When?" "Once. Many times?" And she answered, once, then maybe a second time. It wasn't about sex. It was about being seen. It didn't change what I felt for you, not in the ways that make sense. She tried to make it sound less savage. You can do different things when someone tells you they've betrayed you. The heroic fantasy is to conjure a great speech, to set moral terms and win. The more common human response is to feel your chest hollow, to let a piece of you go cold. I asked for time. She told me she'd move out, that she needed to finish an adjunct residency in another city, that she'd come back to figure out whether we could continue. Then she did the strangest thing. She asked me to trust that she would come back a person she'd learned a bit more about. It was either a plea or a provocation. I do not know which. The months that followed were strange in the sense that they were not dramatic, but filled with a softer kind of violence. Newsletters arrived addressed to the house with programs for plays I'd never heard of. School photo packets we'd set aside were returned with a note about a missed parent-teacher meeting. People asked me if I was okay, and I lied and told them I was fine, because there is a particular dignity in saying you are fine when you are not. They do not need your worry to be added to theirs. I went to counseling on my own and tried to understand the shape of betrayal. The therapist suggested that sometimes people stray not because their partner is lacking in all objective ways, but because the map of intimacy erodes in small and meaningful gestures. She said the question was not whether she had crossed a line, she had, but whether the line meant the same thing to both of us anymore. That answer was both a comfort and a knife. It made it possible to conceive, in some mathematical way, that love might survive this if the calculus were right. It also said plainly, love does not always survive rearrangement. Then the unexpected happened. Maya didn't return. She called 2 months later. There's an opportunity to chair a small program abroad, she said. It's sudden, and I don't want to go without clearing it with you. I thought, maybe this time apart is what I need. It was the sort of sentence that sounded like a decision, and also like an invitation to be left behind. I told her to go. I said it with the brittle generosity of someone who has decided that if love is going to be salvageable, it cannot be built out of coercion. She left. The house felt larger and smaller simultaneously. I had the bed to myself, which was a new kind of silence. I missed the little things, the way she folded laundry, the way she left notes in my sock drawer with stupid jokes. I missed the fact of being two people who had made a life out of a million tiny permissions. The months turned into a year. She wrote occasionally, in emails and not too often long messages. She spoke of classes, of the satisfaction of a patron who laughed at a small scene she'd staged, of late-night coffees and the odd intimacy of strangers in hotel lobbies. She never once wrote, I regret it. She wrote, I'm learning to be honest in ways that scare me. The words felt like a conversation held at a distance. People asked whether I got revenge, whether I found someone else, whether I tore up her plays or sent long, dramatic emails revealing the ledger. The answer is no. I learned, painfully, almost academically, that revenge consumes the person who instigates it more than the person it was aimed at. I also learned that you can survive without dramatic closure. You can be left with a set of fragments and learn to assemble them differently. Sometimes I think about Daniel, the visiting director, who had the charm that seemed to lure attentive ears. I do not know whether he was an angel or a cad. People are both. Their edges are blurred. He wrote me once with a short email that said, simply and without drama, I liked her work. I'm sorry for what happened. That was it. The email felt too small and too big for both of us. Now, and this is where any tidy moral would want you to stand with me and say, he lived, he learned, he moved on. The truth is more ambiguous. I have moved in small, practical ways. New curtains, a bookshelf for scripts I keep meaning to read, more walks in the late afternoon when the light is honest and the world doesn't feel plotted. I have dated, badly and briefly, and learned the strange dance of being new to someone again. Sometimes I forgive myself that I once kept a ledger under the small, ridiculous conceit that truth is born in receipts. And sometimes, in the soft, late hours when the house breathes and the lights of the city are thin, I pick up a letter she sent me months after she left. It's folded, the ink smudged where she'd cried, and in it she admits to a small, human thing, that she left because she felt unseen. She also admits that she met someone who listened, and that listening made her feel young the way she had felt when we first met. The letter is not a confession seeking absolution. It is a memoir of a person trying to describe why they had to go. It makes less clean repairs than it promises. If there is an ending here, it is not one I can offer you with a flourish. I do not know whether she will return on a given Tuesday with apologies and an armful of fresh flowers. I do not know whether she will continue the life she began without me, or whether the small human mercy of time will alter our coordinates again. What I do know is this: I chose, deliberately, not to make bitterness the frame for the rest of my life. I chose instead to let the question exist without attempting to hammer it into certainty. That may sound unromantic, even cowardly. Perhaps it is both. But there is a kind of courage in living with ambiguity. There is a kind of dignity in knowing that some truths do not resolve into a courtroom verdict. They become part of the architecture of the people involved, like a load-bearing wall that was repurposed. You live in the house and rearrange the furniture. So if you want the neat version, betrayal happened, we separated, she left, and I kept breathing. If you want a more honest ending, I am still sometimes jealous, sometimes forgiving, sometimes lonely, and sometimes at peace. The ledger is closed in my pocket, but the entries live in my head. Tonight the window is open and the room smells faintly of lemon cleaner again. There is a mug cooling on the table and Rupert is sleeping in the sunspot like he always did. I keep the letter in a drawer. I take it out on rainy days and read her words and trace the lines with the pad of my thumb. It is a small ritual. It is not resolution. It is not hope in the way songs promise hope. It is instead the quiet practice of living in a world where people change, sometimes toward you and sometimes away. If I were brave, maybe I'd track her down and ask her if what she felt for Daniel was a love that could stand. If I were cruel, maybe I'd publish the ledger and lay our life open for strangers to judge. Instead, I pour more coffee and set a fresh plant on the windowsill, and sometimes, in a moment of absurd generosity, I smile when I see a rehearsal poster for one of her shows. I hope she is learning who she is. I hope selfishly that she remembers us kindly. But I also suspect that some questions do not ask for answers. They only ask for a willingness to live with the not knowing. That is my choice for now.